Welcome to Doug's channel. Now, Final Fantasy VII, the original one, was my first exposure to the entire Final Fantasy series. I played Final Fantasy 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, and X, and I've never finished any of them. Doesn't take away from the sadness that I've never finished any of it. But I've always enjoyed my time with the games, and 7 has always been my favorite within this. And of course, Cloud's even my main in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So when they said the remake of Final Fantasy 7 was coming out, I am pretty excited about it. And so I gave the demo a download, and we're gonna break it down and see what my thoughts are on the demo of Final Fantasy 7, the remake. First off, let's talk about the aesthetic of the game. It's an absolutely beautiful game now. The cutscenes flow flawlessly into the actual gameplay, and from the character models to the enemies and the overall world, this game is gorgeous. I play so many Switch games that sometimes I forget just how great PS4 graphics can be sometimes, especially when they're done right, and this one shows off some of basically what the best of what the system can do graphic-wise. And let's just take a quick little comparison of what the original game looked like versus the new game side by side. Holy cow, I mean, that's a massive, massive upgrade, and some could even argue it seems like a totally different game. Moving on to our next point, the game does seem like a totally different game. The gameplay is where we see the biggest departure from the original. The original game was a turn-based RPG, which makes sense because your character had so many powers and options that it seemed like it had no choice but to be that kind of game. However, this game is a full-on action game. It still somehow maintains the RPG elements of the original, and it's just this really cool mesh of the two. You're in complete control of your character, like I said, action game wise, to roll, evade, attack, cast spells, use items, or even swap between characters, and it's all in your own timing. But this isn't like any action game I've ever played before, because you have all these abilities that you can use and control and monitor while you're fighting through the action parts. It's just this weird perfect mix of RPG and action. As Cloud, you can swap fighting modes from operator mode to punisher mode depending on if you want to evade more or to use these powerful attacks. You can select different abilities or spells to use during the battle, build up your special moves and limit attacks, and even swap between your party members to execute other abilities and attacks when it's needed. It feels like you have all the RPG commands executed within an action game, which, like I said, I've never had this before, and I love it. Now, fighting is not as straightforward as most action games because it's forcing you to figure out which attacks to do at what times, build up enemy pressure to stagger them, and also to choose which character is best for the job at that time. In the demo, you only get to play as Cloud and Barret since this is the opening mission of the game, but I can only imagine how fun it will be when you get to full party and you can swap between them all with their varying abilities. Now, this is not a game that you can just simply hack and slash your way through the whole thing. I have no issue with those kind of games. I love those games, but this is the game where you actually have to learn your characters, learn the enemies, and it does make for a little bit more rewarding of an experience as you go. And speaking of the enemies, now, most of the normal enemies were pretty average. You could beat them pretty easily. They were cool looking, like the cats and the soldiers and some of the robots. But the boss battle for the demo, my lord, this boss battle is pretty darn intense. It reminded me a little bit of Dark Souls in the fact that having to actually learn the enemy, time my attacks, and try pretty hard to beat him as a whole. It actually took me 2 tries to just simply beat the enemy. Now, when you do this, it feels rewarding. And so completing the demo is rewarding for the player, and that's one thing I love about a game like this, or love about a game like Dark Souls. Within that, you feel like you've actually earned the victory and you're ready to move on. It doesn't feel like you just were given a passing score to move on to the next area. Now, the story of the game is definitely more fleshed out, and the demo showcases this very well. The storyline of Final Fantasy VII is one of the most iconic of the entire Final Fantasy series, and so they don't modify it at all, which is obviously a relief. And they do things to sort of make it clear, explain things a little bit more, and just make the characters feel more alive throughout the storytelling. And so the story, obviously, it continues in the right direction. Overall, this demo left me very excited for the remake that's coming out next month. I had no idea when I downloaded the demo that the combat system was going to be completely overhauled from an RPG game to an action game, but now this is actually the feature I am most looking forward to in the game, and has raised my excitement to a level that I really didn't know I had for this game. And so I definitely plan on getting it next month and see how, seeing how the game goes. I can't imagine it going bad at this point. And play through part 1 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And notice I said part 1 because that does bring up my last little qualm I have with the game, is that they took the storyline for Final Fantasy VII, the original game, and they split it up into multiple episodes. And what we're actually getting next month is going to be part 1 of the overarching story. And so it's $60 for part 1, and then a few years down the road, or maybe next year, they'll release part 2, and however many they're going to put out after that. And so I guess that does, I don't know, that doesn't sit well with me, because I thought when I was going to get this game, it was going to be the full game. I was geared to go. I was excited to, finally live through the entire story. And now it may look like I have to wait multiple years, like I'm watching some sort of Final Fantasy TV show. But anyway, that is a side point. The game itself, the demo, the gameplay of the game, I'm excited for it, and we'll see what next month has to offer. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And as always, go out there, find a great game to play, and just have a great rest of the day.